shout. Go back to the shout. 1, 2. One. One.
What's happening in 2024?
One.
That's what we're doing in 2024. Everybody.
One.
Come on, y'all, say it with me. Let me hear you
One.
first. What you gonna do? Because I'm more than a conqueror. 2024. Declare it over your life.
Yes, sir. One.
What we gonna do? All year long. Hey, what you gonna do?
Whoa.
We hear you, Cali worship. Let's send that message to heaven. Thank you for the victory, Jesus. Thank you for the battles that are already won. Hey. Everybody say, I'm more than a conqueror. I can do all things through Christ.
After the groove.
Therefore, I shall. Hey, yeah. No matter how dark, no matter how long, I'm winning. I'm winning.
Bum.
I like it. What you gonna do?
One.
And God, we thank you 'cause I stay winning. I stay on top.
One.
I stay winning. What you gonna do?
After the
The
groove.
devil thought he had me, but he thought it was gonna take me down and take me out. But guess what, devil? I'm winning. Oh! He thought I was gonna lose. He thought that last trial was gonna take me out. But I'm winning. And I'm winning. I'm winning.
Bum.
This is how I fight my battles. This is how I. Let me hear you say. This is how I fight my battles. Hallelujah.
One.
Glory to God.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Rise and shine and let's give God some glory, for this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. PC's here. You're here. Now y'all know what to do. Share, tag, like, tell everybody it's time for church on this Sunday morning. Oh my goodness, we're in March. 3 months since 2024. How have y'all been doing on the journey? Come on, talk to me. Let me know how it's been going. Listen, I need y'all to right now begin to share, tag, like, tell everybody, get everybody on, because everybody has a story. Everybody is on a journey. And I believe that this is a year, this is the season, this is the moment where we can get instructions from God and be able to be built up and encouraged and strengthened to continue to walk by faith, not by sight, to be able to do what God has called for us to do. So I'm so glad to be with you this morning. Oh, I may not be able to see you, but do me a favor right now. Put in the chat where you're from. Tell somebody good morning. Let us know that you are present, that you are here. And if you're here, guess what? God is here too. For where the presence of the Lord is, there is liberty, there is freedom. So if you're all around the world is watching, and if you're on podcasts, or if you see TikTok, if you're on our reels, we say welcome to Life Change. We believe that God's about to bring transformation, healing, deliverance, breakthrough. And my God, I pray that what you see today will inspire you, will motivate you. But my ultimate prayer is that you will be transformed by the word of God and by the living epistle of this word. And so we've got so much in store. My goodness. So what y'all need to do, share, tag, like. And if you've gone through a week where you've been going through where you don't know what to do, then I pray, put your shouting shoes on for a couple of minutes and let's go to church, because you're on a winning side. You're on God's side. And the word says, greater are you. Greater is he that is in you than he that's in the world. You can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. So come on, come on, come on. Take off that heaviness and put on a spirit of praise. Clap your hands, all ye people, and shout unto God with a voice of triumph. Come on, shout. Come on, lift them up. Come on, bless the Lord, all your soul, and all that's within you. Bless his holy name. Come on, that's what you gotta do. You gotta desire it. You gotta will it. So come on, let's get ready to go through this week in a praise. Go through this week with God's blessings upon you. Go through this week knowing that his face is turned towards you to give you peace and to bless you. So it's about to be on and popping. Listen, we've had a powerful time on this weekend. As you all already know, we have announced several weeks about this powerful gathering that we had on yesterday. 32 some odd states all over the nation, along with DC, gathered together at state houses to make it known that the 144 million people that are living under livable wages, that are poor and trying to make ends meet, that we have made our voices known, that we have come in agreement to say enough is enough, and that we are going to make a radical shift, a radical change within our nation in this year alone. We're about to make history. And so for all of those right here in my state or in other states all around our nation, if you gathered, if you marched, if you made your voices heard, if you just came just to be a part, we want to thank you. But over these next 40 weeks, we are going to mobilize, we're organized, and we're going to continue to fight the good fight of faith to see that those who are oppressed, those that are marginalized, those that are poor, those that are blind, those that are being affected by policy murder that's going on in the U.S. alone. But not only in the U.S., all around our world, we are a people of God that not only will pray, but then will put our prayers into action. And so, yesterday was a powerful demonstration of this movement. And so in a moment, we're going to see an excerpt of some of the things that took place. And we're going to hear from none other than our own Bishop William Barber, who is going to give us the rallying call, remind us of what the biblical text is all about, remind us that Jesus came to set captives free, to open up blinded eyes, to preach good news to the poor, and to be able to bring truth, healing, justice to our world. Let me remind you, as we get ready to watch this powerful excerpt and hear from this powerful man of God, that in Matthew 25, do you remember when it was stated, when the question was asked, when it was made known that when I was hungry, did you give me something to drink, to eat? When I was thirsty, did you give me something to drink? When I was a stranger, an immigrant, did you welcome me in? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was sick and in jail, incarcerated, did you come to care for me? The question was asked, when did I do this? And Jesus said, if you have done it to the least of these, if you helped and gave food to the hungry, if you gave water to the thirsty, if you took the stranger in, if you clothed the naked, went and cared for the sick, then you have done it to me. Church, it's time for us to live the gospel so that we can be what God has called for us to be. Let's watch this. Let's get empowered, inspired, encouraged. Most of all, my prayer is that you will be transformed, because as we cry out for others, God will take care of our need. Let's go.
Won't be silent anymore.
Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too long. Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Yeah, somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too.
We take time to think, to reminisce. At a funeral,
take time to think of the reality of what is really going on. At a funeral, we shed tears. At a funeral, we think of the loss. At a funeral, we know that the one that has died, we will not talk to anymore. Share hopes and dreams anymore. Be able to embrace anymore. Be able to, even at times, have disagreements, but still find a way to come back and say, I'm sorry. For thousands have died in just COVID alone. Not due to COVID, but due to inadequate health care. And so here we stand today with our demands to say that somebody's been hurting our people and it's gone on
far too long.
Somebody's been hurting our people
And it's gone on far too long.
As we took this moment, we're thinking of all of the names, all of the people whose story will never be told, books that will never be written, songs that will never be sung, struggles that will never be talked about. But we stand here today in our state, along with 32 other states, lamenting, mourning, crying out with tears of injustice, tears of unfair labor practice, tears where somebody worked all of their life and still could not get a proper burial, buried in debt, buried in health care issues, buried in lack of health care, buried in food insecurities, buried in domestic abuse. So we stand and we will be the voice. We will be the presence. We will be the story to remind this nation that 800 a day, 32,000 a week, 240 some odd a year, and not one legislature, policy being written to say it will be no more. So as we go back to hear the story of those who are alive in the struggle, and as we make our demands known, and as we send out the call and the challenge, let us walk from this state house back to a church where we can come together, cry together, pray together, march together, hold hands together.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too.
And today, we are gathered here in Providence, along with 34 other states and D.C., all across the country for our mass poor people and low-wage workers simultaneous State House assemblies. And we will not accept, today we come and we say that we will not accept poverty being the fourth leading cause of death anymore. Poverty that is abolishable and unnecessary. For we are determined to take back the mic from extremism, raise our voices and register and cast our votes as demands and wake up the sleeping giant. For we are here today mobilizing, educating, and engaging 15 million infrequent, poor, low-wage voters who have not voted in past elections. It is time to wake up the sleeping giant of poor and low-wage voters who make up more than 30% of the electorate nationwide. All over our country, if just 20 to 30% of poor and low-wage infrequent voters were moved, they can change election outcomes and political outcomes. In many places, it is less than 10%. But we know, as a pastor in the book of Deuteronomy, it states, chapter 15, it says that there need be no poor among us. For poverty and low wages are bad political choices. And we cannot be disengaged anymore from the political process. If poor and low-wage people would vote at the same time as the rate of others, every political calculation, it is stated, can shift. For the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said at the mass of Negro and poor whites, if we come together and form a voting bloc, that it could change the economic architecture of our nation. So today we have come to assemble white, black, Hispanic, Latinx, Asian, indigenous people who now represent more than 80 million voters and over 20 million that have yet not voted. But did you know that 135 million poor and low-wage people look like this in America? 60%, 24 million black people. 64%, which equals 38 million Hispanic and Latinx people. 40%, which equals 80 million Asian people. 60%, which equals 2 million of indigenous people. And 37%, 66 million of our white brothers and sisters. We can do this.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too.
There is a passage of scripture, and I want to take a risk tonight with Rodney being here. You know, he's an Old Testament scholar. You know, one of the few, at one time, he and his wife were one of the few African-American Old Testament scholars in the world. And I want to take a risk tonight of wrestling with a text in a minute from the Old Testament with New Testament and 21st century implications. Now, where I come from, some preachers would get up, they say, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. So imagine you were up here, right? Okay, all right. I want to talk about tonight, as we're organizing, what to do when things don't make sense. Nancy, what to do when things don't make sense? I was recently in Michigan, right up there where all those lakes are. And the temperature was about 2 degrees. But when the wind chill came in, the Arctic blast, they called it, the temperature dropped from 2 degrees to something like 15 to 20 below. I was supposed to speak up there, and it started snowing. But I looked out on the lake, and the lake was standing still, just like a picture, frozen in time, frozen in time. And there wasn't a wave moving, but it wasn't flat either, which was strange to me. Didn't make sense. And I asked somebody, what is that? And they said, when the Arctic blast comes in, it can freeze the waves. That didn't make sense to me. I know about freezing. I know about freezing in an ice box. I know about freezing in a refrigerator. I know about things freezing, but the idea that something could be so cold so quick that it could freeze the waves in midair didn't make sense to me. Some things just don't make sense. And they make you stop and say, what's going on here? You know, during this COVID period, I don't know about you, but I've had some real serious musing moments thinking about my own existence. Because I was talking to my doctor when COVID was first announced, and he made it very clear that because I have immune deficiencies, I couldn't afford to even get near it prior to any kind of vaccination. And so sometimes when I stand up here, it doesn't make sense to me that I'm still alive. In fact, it got on me real bad one night because I've been with families who have lost 15 members of their family and 20 members of their family. And I know that I've been around it somewhere. And I was wrestling with that, Rodney, and I asked the question, Lord, why am I still alive? And way over in the midnight one night, as I was doing my best to imitate Howard Thurman's musing, something said to me, that's always the wrong question. The question, why are you still alive, will never really make sense, because none of us can answer that. The old folk used to say, we've seen dangers seen and unseen. But the question that we ought to ask, is not why am I still alive? Because all of us only have about 6 minutes. If any of us in here were to stop breathing for 6 minutes, it's probably over. Our brain functions and everything else, 6 minutes. Now, there are some people that can hold their breath 15 minutes, they die, but that's unusual. They train for years, but for the average of us, 6 minutes, that's it. So the question is not, why am I still alive? Because that may never make sense to you. How many of you all have come through some things and it doesn't make sense to you that you're still here, but you are? You see what I'm saying? All over the house. But the question is, what am I going to do with my 6 minutes, or my 6 hours, or my 6 days, or my 6 weeks, or my 6 months, or my 6 years, or my 60 years? Sometimes things just don't make sense. And they make us stop and ask, what's going on here? It doesn't make sense to me that a would-be dictator who has basically said that's what I'm going to do and be, is still getting millions of dollars from billionaires and dark money. Doesn't make sense to me. People keep blaming Trump. It's got to be bigger than Trump, because he's just one person. It doesn't make sense to me that the 14th Amendment is clear. If you engage in an insurrection, you lose the right. And yet, just yesterday in South Carolina, there's a primary. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. that people who claim to idealize the Constitution, they always talk about being constitutional fundamentalists. But when it comes to this particular person, here's the text, Rodney. In Ezekiel chapter 22, some things were going on that didn't make sense. And God says to Ezekiel, your politicians are acting like wolves, tearing their prey. This is in the Message Bible. They shed the blood and kill people to make unjust gain. But something worse is going on. Your prophets whitewash their deeds. Your prophets preach false visions and lying divinations. And the false prophets say, this is what the sovereign Lord says, when the Lord has not spoken one thing. And because of this, politicians who are more like wolves in the way they do their jobs, and false prophets that undergird their wolf-like reality, the people of the land practice extortion. And the people of the land commit robbery. They oppress the poor and the needy. And they mistreat the immigrants at their borders. And they deny them justice. Verse 30, chapter 22, I looked for someone among them who would stand in the gap to stop this oppression, and I couldn't find anybody. But then if you read 15 chapters over, Ezekiel finds hope. And doesn't make sense. God takes him to a valley of people who are the victims of oppression. Yes. And the imagery of those people is that they look like dry bones. And they were so poor, so needy, so hurt, that the powerful didn't even give them the dignity of a burial. And they look like nothing. And God says to Ezekiel, can these bones live? And Ezekiel says what I would have said, I don't know. Looks pretty bad. Doesn't make sense. But God says, these dry bones may be dry and brittle and unburied, but their souls still have ears. Now, what I need you to do is go preach in the valley. I need you to organize among the bones. I need you to call for a movement among the bones. And when you call for the movement and preach, then I need you to step back and let me my spirit on them. And the very ones who have been the victims, the prey of mean politics, will be the answer of deliverance and the hope. In fact, the text says, and they became an army. The very ones, the most hurt ones. During COVID, I learned of two families that represent so many families. One was in my own congregation when I was pastoring. They lost 12 members of their family in a 2-3 week radius because their family members existed in states where the states refused to expand Medicaid. So they were among the 350,000 people that died during COVID, not because of COVID, but because they did not have health care. Yeah. And if I do a little crazy preacher right here, and man, what's her name? what's her name? Kassan. If I do that, it's not. I'm not picking. I have a tension thing. So if anybody's doing anything in front of me except like go on, preacher, it takes me off. So I may say just slide to the side, but I'm not being funny. I just want you to know it's me. It's me. But then I met this young lady in Mississippi who showed me something that didn't make sense. She lost 25 members of her family in a 30-mile radius. 25 members of her family. And we went to her one day, and she's in the movement, and we were having an event, and we said, honey, you don't have to come to this event. You need to be home. You need to be. She says, I don't have a family anymore. She said this, if there was ever a time I needed to be in a movement, it was right now. It didn't make sense that this woman who lost so much said, I want to be in the army. It would make sense if she just rolled off depressed somewhere. It would make sense if she just quit. It would make sense if she just lost her mind. But in the midst of the pain, she said, I want to be where the power is. And the power is with those who have been hurt the most. But understand, now is their time to rise. What do you do when things don't make no sense? But as I was hearing those realities, it didn't make sense. So I was in Rome at the Pontifical Academy on Social Sciences. I had been invited by Pope Francis and Jeffrey Sachs to join that conversation. And when we were talking about poverty, we had a break, and I asked Jeffrey Sachs, I said, can you do a study on low wages, COVID, and death, especially in the cultural context of America, where we changed people's names from service workers to essential workers. You all know that's what happened. Before COVID, they were service workers. During COVID, suddenly they became essential workers, which was a name code to force people to go to work, while we still treated them like they were expendable. And Jeffrey Sachs said, sure, we can do this. I'll put my team of experts on it at Columbia University. And he did. And you know what they found out? Because it didn't make sense to me, all these folk died. They found out that whether in the North, the South, the West, whether in Virginia or Alabama or Maine or Mississippi or West Virginia or Florida, whether black or white or brown or Asian or Latino, whether gay or straight or trans, poor and low-wage people during COVID are dying at a rate 3 to 5 times higher. Not because COVID discriminated, but because the way we delivered services discriminated. The way we delivered protections to the poor and low-wage people of this country discriminated. Because it didn't make sense, and something had to be wrong here. Somebody had to be producing this. It didn't just happen. What didn't make sense made sense only when you factored in it was happening because somebody was doing wrong. That's what Ezekiel is saying. And whenever people in high places are doing wrong, we need a movement. That's why on March the 2nd, in 33 states in the District of Columbia, poor and low-wage brothers and sisters of every race, creed, color, and sexuality are gathering simultaneously, all at 10 o'clock at the state houses, the state capitals, where the real political insurrections are going on in state capitals, for the mass, moral, poor, and low-wage people's assembly and moral march on state capitals and to the polls. It's not a day, just a day of action. It is a launch. We are launching a movement for 42 weeks, the campaign to mobilize 15 million poor and low-wage voters who have been infrequent voters, 15 million. Educate, motivate, and activate those who must be a movement now, along with religious leaders, people of faith, people not of faith, and other advocates, because what's happening to poor and low-wage people makes no sense. It's happening because somebody is doing wrong. What did Ezekiel say? Your politicians have become like wolves. And what is worse, your prophets tell them things that God has not said. When you consider that we had child tax credit expansion during COVID. Going into COVID, 51% of all the children in America, in the wealthiest nation in the world, were poor and or low wage. That makes no sense. Before COVID happened, we had 140 million poor and low-wage folk in America. There's a book out now called Poverty by America, not poverty in America, but the particular kind of poverty by America. Princeton scholar has written it. Then we go into COVID, and some investments are made. Even though 68% of all the COVID money went to corporations, some of the money that did happen, child tax credit and some other things, expanding Medicaid, expanding food stamps happened, and poverty went down to 115 million people. Still way too high. But then those programs were ended. After 6 months, 8 months, ended. How do you do that? Lift 60% of children out of poverty for 6 months and then throw them right the hell back in it. Somebody is doing something wrong. And so now we're back to 135 million poor and low wealth people, 60% black, 36% Asian, 32% of white people, even though there are 40 million more white people who are poor and low wage. Long-term poverty in America claims 295,000 lives every year, 800 lives a day. That's more than homicide, more than gun violence, more than diabetes and obesity. Why? Because somebody's doing something wrong. You can't, it makes no sense otherwise. And despite this, when extremists, trickle-down extremists, say what they say is poverty is two things. It's a minority problem, and it's a problem with people who are just lazy and on some kind of glorified vacation. But then neoliberal Democrats say if you just lift from the middle, everything will be well, and both are wrong. Yes. Do you know right now in this country, 2 children, 2 parents, it requires $25 an hour just to have a basic living wage. That means eat meat twice a week and maybe have a good used car. But a third of the workforce makes less than $15 an hour. 52 million people earn less than $15 an hour. And we've not raised the minimum wage since 2009. Minimum wage has been $7.25 for the last 15 years. Work has gone up, productivity has gone up, prices have gone up, Congress people wages have gone up. CEOs' money have gone up, but workers, $7.25 an hour. And tip workers, when you go to a restaurant tomorrow, $2.13 an hour by law. And a lot of tip workers, a lot of restaurant workers during COVID, they could not even qualify for COVID relief because their base pay was not high enough. So I've traveled the country and met with waitresses who have told the stories of what folk asked them to do because they knew they were hurting economically. We gave 748 U.S. billionaires $2 trillion, made them $2 trillion richer since 2017. And 400 families in this country make an average of $92 an hour, while you can get arrested standing on a picket line fighting for $15 an hour in a union. Somebody's doing wrong because this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that you don't raise the minimum wage. That what $15 an hour is actually less than what was asked for at the March on Washington in 1963. Do you know that the agenda for the March on Washington, the first item was raise the minimum wage by 75 cents and index it with inflation? That's why the March on Washington was not about kumbaya. It was a march for jobs and justice, which is why every time we remember the March on Washington, and all we remember is I have a dream, we are doing disservice to the very reason. Ask Bayard Rustin, that same gender-loving brother whom without there would have been no March on Washington. Something is wrong. Something is wrong when right in the middle of this, During COVID, we actually got a vote on the living wage, $15. We got a vote. Our movement, we pushed it. We got it through with other unions like SEIU and Mary Kay, Henry. We got it through the House. We got it passed. We got it to the Senate. So we said, oh my goodness, because poor and low wealth people voted at 54, 56% for progressive. They didn't vote against their own interest. I'm talking black or white in the 2020 election. So we're like, we got it. This is COVID. It's going to happen. The vote comes down. 50 Republicans say no, but we said, well, we got it because it's going to be a tie, and then Kamala Harris, the vice president, will get to pass the tie. And then 8 moderate Democrats said no. So 58 congresspeople said no to 52 million people. So folk today don't have a minimum wage of $15 an hour because somebody's doing wrong. Here we are. Next month, March, 15 to 18 million people are expected to lose Medicaid because of the end of pandemic protection. 105 million people do not have paid family leave. We said, you're essential, but I'll be damned if we're going to give you paid family leave. You're essential. But if we pay you higher, you're going to cause more inflation. That's the story. They say wage inflation is what causes inflation. No, inflation is caused by war and the debt from wars and pandemics and price gouging. And bad policies. Right now, we sit in this room tonight, 46 million people can get up every morning and buy unleaded gas and can't buy unleaded water. 1.5 million, 1 in 5 families can't afford to pay at least one energy bill right now. Why? Because somebody's doing wrong. Ezekiel called it politicians acting like wolves. And prophetic leaders who are supposed to be challenging that, instead of being challengers of the state, they become defenders of the state. Somebody, and it's not just national. That's why we've got to have this rally March 2nd, this launching, because it's not just right here in North Carolina. In North Carolina, there are 3.5 million poor and low-income eligible voters. They make up 41% of the electorate. Right here in North Carolina, between 2018 and 2020, there were 4.2 million Sangria North Carolinians who were poor and or low income. That's 40% of North Carolinians. That's 4 out of every 10. 37%, almost 40% of the state's workforce in this state makes less than $15 an hour. That's 328,000 households. 328,000 households were behind on their rent payments beginning in 2023. And yet, our state assembly has made it easier to get a gun than to get food. Somebody's doing something wrong. Both senators from North Carolina voted against living wages, voted against expanding voting rights. 372,000 people are expected to lose Medicaid in this state by March of 2024 because our congressional leadership, certain ones of them, voted against extending it. 4 million workers in North Carolina, 78% of the workforce do not have paid family leave. And my God, let's talk about education. Right now, Senate Pro Tem Leader Berger and Speaker Moore have done everything they could do, all the legal gymnastics to get the Leandro case brought back before the North Carolina Supreme Court. It was settled law. The law simply says you can't underpay poor school districts. That's all it says. And it says that based on the article, in the Article 1 of our state constitution, in 1868, when our constitution was rewritten, black and white fusionist politicians guaranteed public education in North Carolina. That's not even a guarantee we have in the federal constitution. And they didn't guarantee it even for all children. They said all people have a right. And that the state has to protect and guard. That's the line. The state has to protect, guard, and maintain. Yes. That means fund it. Yes. Right? And yet, just the other day, they got it back in front of the Supreme Court. They're trying to change it. Now, Berger's son is on the court, and he won't recuse himself. So you got a crooked court, the same court that passed laws that were created an unconstitutionally constituted legislature. And now they want to go against Section 15 of Article 1 of the state constitution. That's not happening yesterday. That's happening right now. Right now in this state. And somebody's doing wrong in this state. And if you underfund education, you underfund excellence, you underfund equality, you underfund the economy, and you underfund your future, your expectations. That's why Jesus said it would be better for you to tie a millstone around your neck and throw yourself into the sea rather than offend one of the children. Huh? Truth is, they may have stacked the Supreme Court of man, but they've not stacked the Supreme Court of God. Something's wrong here. But I want you to understand what's going on and why we can't be passive. Why you need to be mobilizing folk to come out with us, why we need to launch this. Because right here in North Carolina, we've passed lotteries, but we haven't honored the laws demands for our children. We've passed voter suppression, but we haven't honored the laws for our children. We've passed bills to block living wages and block health care, but we have not honored the law as it pertains to our children. And then you need to know where this is really, really coming from. Because what they also did in this last budget, they passed a budget that will result in $13 billion in tax cuts, almost exclusively for wealthy folk and corporations. And it will give hundreds of millions of dollars to private schools that discriminate with vouchers. Now hear me well, but why you need to hear this, particularly as it relates to poor and low wealth children. This plan originally was called the Pearsall Plan. This is in the Bible. It says a dog will return to his vomit. This is the vomit. Oh, I'm talking like Ezekiel tonight. I'm sorry. This is Ezekiel coming out of me. He said your politicians have become like wolves. That's what he said, right? In the 1960s, after Brown versus Board of Education, politicians in North Carolina came up with a plan called the Pearsall Plan. And the Pearsall Plan said, if you do not want to desegregate, the state will give you a voucher. That plan was defeated by the case that came out of here, Charlotte Mecklenburg. And Charlotte, you got to know this. You can't let them turn this around. If it had not been for the Charlotte Mecklenburg case, that pushed Bushing, but also undermined the Pearsall Plan. And now what they're trying to do under the guise of another name is bring it right back. Somebody's doing something wrong. But Ezekiel didn't just say it was the politician. Ezekiel said, but the false prophets, the vision, and the truth is, in the times in which we are living, there's this strange, there are two realities in the church and with other religious bodies. Too many folk are either too quiet or too loud on the wrong stuff. You know, like folk who are so loud talking against gay people, but they can't say a damn thing when it comes to injustice as it relates to living wages. I mean, the stuff that God really cares about. You know, the stuff that God really cares about. And somebody's doing something wrong. It's something wrong when the Pew Foundation did a study about 3 years ago, and they studied 50,000 sermons that's in the American pulpit. And you know what they found? That in 50,000 sermons, the issue of poverty didn't even register 1% of the sermons that are preached in the American pulpit, even though poverty shows up in Jesus' first sermon all the way through and his last sermon. They said, in the white so-called church, I don't like to use that term, but that's their term, they said the thing that was preached the most about was doctrine. They said in the black church, the thing that was preached the most about was praise and worship. But Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he hath anointed me to preach good news to the poor. Somebody's doing something wrong. I know it's so because there are 2,000 scriptures in the Bible that I read, that talk about how you're supposed to treat the poor, the least of these, and women, and those on the margin. If you cut all of those scriptures out, the Bible falls apart. Let me give you some of them for those listening all around. Whether the Bible is a book of faith or just literature, just come on with me and read this. Proverbs 22:22. Do not abuse poor people because they are poor. Do not take away the rights of the poor, especially in the courts. Proverbs 14:31. Those who oppress the poor insult God. Isaiah 1:17, learn to do good, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, and defend the poor children, and plead for the widow. Isaiah 10, woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights. Psalm 72, God will rescue the poor and the oppressed. Jeremiah 22, this is what the Lord says, go down to the king's palace. Don't send an email, don't send a text message. Go down to the palace and tell those in power, use your power to rescue from the hand of the oppressor, the one that's been robbed. Do no wrong or violence to the immigrant or the foreigner, the fatherless or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood. Matthew 25. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you cursed one, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Why? Because when I was hungry, you didn't give me anything to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. When I was a stranger, an immigrant, you did not invite me in. When I needed clothes, you did not clothe me. When I was sick, you did not care for me. When I was in prison, you did not care for me. And then the wicked will say, Lord, when did we see you hungry, thirsty, a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick and in prison? And he will say, I say unto you truly, that when you did it not unto the least of these, you did not do it unto me. James chapter 5. Now then, listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and your silver are corroded. The corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last day. Look, verse 4, the wages you failed to pay your workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the workers have reached the ears of God. And Deuteronomy, people, you hear them all the time, the poor shall be with you always. Do you know what that text really says in Deuteronomy 15? Listen, it says this. This is what it actually says. However, there need be no poor among you. That's what the text really says. The poor will be with you always is a reaction to the inaction of the people who ought to be doing the thing so there would be no poor people. The text actually says, there need be no poor among you, for the land of the Lord the God is giving you, it possesses as your inheritance. He will richly bless you if you fully obey the Lord and are careful how you keep his commandment, for the Lord God will bless you as he's promised. If anyone is poor among you or your fellow person in any of the towns of the lands that the Lord has given you, do not be hard-hearted against them. Do not be tight-fisted. Do not charge them usury or interest. Be open-handed. Freely lend to them. Be careful not to harbor wicked against the poor. And in the 7th year, release all the debts. Then it says, the poor will be with you always, almost as though the Spirit said, because y'all ain't going to do this. But the original text says, there needs to be no poor among you. And when there are, somebody's doing wrong. And when somebody is doing wrong, the second thing, somebody must do something about the somebodies that are doing wrong. That's the second thing. We can't just accept being acted on in history, Pastor. We must act in history. We can't sit inside of our church's quarantine from the world. No. In fact, it costs us too much not to do something. Child poverty costs us $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion a year in lost productivity. Unstable housing among families with children cost us $111 billion a year in unnecessary health costs. Hunger cost us $160 billion a year in health care. And $18 billion in poor educational outcome because a child whose stomach is growling cannot figure what 2 + 2 is and 7 + 8 is. It's hard. They may do it, but it's hard. public assistance spend $153 billion a year as a result of low wages. In other words, if you pay people a living wage, they wouldn't need public assistance. Gender and racial wage gaps cost workers $2.5 trillion a year in lost earnings. Mass incarceration costs $179 billion a year. Our immigration system broken costs $123 billion in lost contribution to our gross domestic product. In our current health care, it costs $1.69 trillion in private insurance and out-of-pocket expenses. Inaction on climate change is going to cost us $3.3 trillion a year, plus our world. Our government has spent $21 trillion on war and militarizing and borders and the war economy since 2001. If you just took 10% of the war economy military budget and used it toward things that work, we could fund everybody that needs health care, give every child a decent education. Raising the refusal to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour cost us $328 billion into the hands of families and into the economy. And for every $1 per hour that wages rise, among those at the bottom 60% of earnings, the government spends less. Actually, for every $1, we spend $5.2 billion less. We cannot just let the somebodies that are doing something wrong have the last say. Touch your neighbor and say, somebody's doing something wrong. And touch the other one and say, and somebody must do something about somebody who's doing. But here's the hope. Somebody can do something. Oh my God. You see, God has fixed it so that the stones that the builders rejected can now become the chief cornerstones of a new reality. God has fixed it so, see, after a while, you oppress people so much, you end up having more oppressed people than you have of the oppressor. And God has fixed it so now that poor and low-wage folk have a power to rise up. Inside of all those ugly numbers, 135 million poor and low-wealth people, 87 million people without health care, 52 million people without a living wage. But inside those numbers, like inside of a stone that has yet been touched by a sculptor, inside those ugly numbers is hope. Inside those numbers is a valley of dry bones that has power. In fact, listen, in low-wage voters, poor and low-wage voters in battleground states like Arizona, Georgia, Florida, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Wisconsin, in those states where the margin of victory was within 3% in the presidential rate, poor and low-wage voters hold the power to change those margin of voters. And in Texas, it was only 5%, and they hold the power. What kind of power are you talking about, Reverend Barber? Well, you know, I told y'all some time ago, the worst thing you can do is be loud and wrong. So we did some studying. We got a study done called Waking the Sleeping Giant. We got some of the best scholars and sociologists and statisticians to pull the numbers, and let me tell you what we found. Oh my God, low-income, poor, low-wage workers now account for, in those battleground states, 34 to 40% of the electorate. You don't hear that on CNN. You don't hear that on MSNBC. All they talk about is the middle class and the wealthy. But that's why you have to have a movement to talk about the other side of the reality. Fact of the matter, in low-income voters account for at least 20% of the electorate in all states in this country. And in the battleground states, they account for nearly 40% of the electorate in battlegrounds. Right? And in a time when the margins of victory are so close, the margin of victory is so close, it means now that the stones that the builders rejected now have the power to become the chief cornerstones of a whole new voting electorate. The valley can rise now. The valley can rise. Can these bones live? Well, let me tell you, did you know that if you look at Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and North Carolina, the margin of victory in 2020 was 270,000 votes in presidential, just 270,000 votes. 27,000 votes. In Michigan, it was 10,000 votes, and 1 million poor and low-wage voters didn't vote. In Wisconsin, it was 30,000 votes, and over 1 million poor and low-wage voters didn't vote. In Pennsylvania, it was about 40,000, and 1 million poor and low-wage voters didn't vote. In North Carolina, it was 170,000 votes, and 990 a million voters did not vote. So if you put all that together, between those 4 states, those are major states, right? Those are states we're always looking at, late night on election night. What's going to happen in Pennsylvania? What's going to happen in Michigan? What's going to happen in Wisconsin? What's going to happen in North Carolina? The margin of victory was 270,000 votes, but the number of poor and low-wage voters in the valley is over 4 million votes. Good God from Zion. Y'all don't hear what I'm saying? You don't hear what I'm saying? Huh? 1% in Wisconsin could change everything. 1% in Philadelphia could change everything. 1% in Michigan could change everything. And 18% in North Carolina. Now, why isn't anybody talking about this? Because Dr. King told us at the end of the Selma to Montgomery March, he said the greatest fear of the Southern aristocracy and the greedy aristocracy in this country was for the masses of poor Negroes and the masses of poor white folk to come together and form a voting bloc that could fundamentally shift the economic architecture of this nation. So it's time for the valley to rise. Y'all don't hear what I'm saying? That's why we're launching. That's why we're launching this campaign for 40 plus weeks. That's why we're launching it in 33 states and the District of Columbia, because we've got to answer the question, can these bones live? And my answer is yes. If we organize, yes. Yes, they can live. Yes, they must live. Yes, God has given us a power, and it's time to use that power like never before. Oh, my God. And guess what? I'm going to help y'all. Look at your neighbor and say, you don't have to like everything about me. No, not to organize with me. You don't have to like everything about me. You have to decide you love justice, and you love righteousness, and you love people being treated right. And if you do that, we can get together. We can get together. When we come together, we have a power. Next Sunday is the day after our mobilization, is the anniversary of the march of the Selma, the Bloody Sunday. Next Sunday. Next Sunday is the anniversary of Bloody Sunday, 39 years ago. And back then, things didn't make sense. Here they were in 1965, and the 15th Amendment guaranteeing the right to vote had been quantified and passed and put in the Constitution in 1870. And here they were in 1965, and the vote was still being blocked. It didn't make sense. But instead of crying about it, they went to Selma and they mobilized and they organized, and they came together. And the truth is, our foreparents did more with less. Touch your neighbor and say, I'm not going to allow that to happen. They did more with less. They organized. They didn't have TikTok. They didn't have cell phone. They didn't have a fax machine. That's old. They didn't have social media. They didn't have any of that stuff. But they organized. And they decided that there comes a time you've got to change history, not just accept history. Can these bones live? Yes. I believe that in 2020, we saw an insurrection, but now we need a resurrection. We need a resurrection. We need a third reconstruction. Can these bones live? Well, since I'm in the church, Bishop, if Moses and a rod and some children of Hebrew children can bring down Pharaoh, yes, these bones can live. If Joshua and some folk can walk around a wall until the vibrations bring it down, yes, these bones can live. If David can get 5 stones and kill Goliath and his cousins, yes, these bones can live. If Daniel can go to sleep on a lion like a pillar, and Shadrach, Meshach, and a bad Negro can go in a fiery furnace and come out, yes. If Paul and Silas can come out of a jail in the middle of the night, yes. If Jesus can feed 5,000 and get up out of a 3-day-old grave, yes. If Harriet Tubman, who had epilepsy, can get 700 slaves out of slavery. She didn't have an education. She didn't have all the stuff we had. She had epilepsy, but she had a moss on the north side of the tree. She had a faith in God. She had a 38 pistol, because you were going to get saved and free one way or the other. But put that aside. If Rosa Parks can sit down and change the nation, yes, these bones bones can live. If Bishop Tutu, a black Anglican, and Peter Story, a white Methodist, and the mothers of South Africa can turn apartheid around, yes, these bones can live. Yes, these bones can live. Surely these bones can live and change things. Surely these bones can live. Surely our votes can change things until we abolish the reality that poverty is the fourth leading cause of death. Surely these bones can live. Surely our votes can change things until a living wage is passed, until voting rights are protected and expanded, until there's no more voter suppression, until workers' rights are protected, until affordable housing and affordable health care is provided for everybody. Surely these bones can live. Surely our votes can change things until there's clean water for everybody, until there's environmental justice, until there's fully funded public education. Surely these bones can live. Surely our votes can change things until we welcome immigrants in this country, until we take on the lies and the homophobia and the anti-Semitism and the Islamophobia, until hate has to be less and love has to be more. Surely these bones can live and our votes can change things until women have a right to their own bodies. Surely these bones can live. Surely we can change things until every child is educated. Yes, 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 these bones can live. Yes, these bones can change things. Yes, you're the bones. You're the bones. You're the bones. Live, 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 live. There's an army rising. Live. Tonight is a mass meeting. We're going to sing a little bit. There's an army rising to break every chain. Come on. And then we want you to stay. Pastor, and there are some people that are going to come that are the face of these numbers. Don't leave them. They're the face. They impact the people. And they're going to tell you why they're mobilizing. And then Sangria is going to come and tell you, and Rodney, what to do for next Saturday. We need everybody. This is a launch. This is not a one-day thing. This is a launch. But we need to let folk know we are alive. The valley is rising. Poor and low-wage folk, religious and moral leaders, and advocates, people of faith, people who are not necessarily of faith, but they believe in the moral arc of the universe. It's time to rise. It's time to live. God didn't give us this power for us to sit down on it. God has made it so that the hope comes out of the valley. Can these bones live? Surely. Surely they can. Surely they must. Surely they have to. Because see, the issue is not saving democracy. It's having a democracy worth saving. And the only democracy that's worth saving is where everybody is in and nobody is out. Come on, Bones.
Thank you for joining us here at Life Change. Listen, if you have been blessed, inspired, transformed, motivated, encouraged, or maybe with tears in your eyes having to go to the throne of grace to ask for repentance, then that's what this is all about. I pray that this broadcast has blessed you. And if it has, then do me a favor. Like, share, comment, matter of fact, subscribe so that we could get the word out that Life Change is here to change lives. Until next week, have a blessed week, and we'll see you again right here at Life Change.